Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. We have a lot to cover with you today. Obviously, headed down to Indianapolis for the NFL Combine. We're going to have so much for you this week, so many videos with potential draft picks. We're going to talk to Marion Hampton, Ashton Genty. We're going to talk to all the quarterbacks. We're going to be talking to linemen. We're going to be, I mean, literally, we're going to have so much for you. So it's going to be a little bit drinking out of a fire hose with so much information, but that's all right. Just hold the line. It'll all be good. We'll have podcasts for you all week coming, from the combine with the latest information and so much more. We're going to have interviews with Pete Carroll. We're going to have interviews with John Spytek and a lot more. So it's going to be a very, very busy week, but we got a lot to get into. You may remember I talked with you at the Super Bowl about a lot of talk about a Raiders trade. And then last week, I came out with my first 5-round mock draft. And I had a bunch of people email me saying, Hondo, you left out one of the Raiders' 3rd-round picks. And I did not leave it out. I had anticipated the Raiders using one of those picks to make a trade. So I just wanted to let you know that I still think that the Raiders, I think if it were today, would probably get Will Howard in the 3rd round. I still expect there to, I don't know what I expect is the right word. I still think there's the potential of a trade. I know that the Raiders, again, I started talking about it at the Super Bowl that I was hearing that the Raiders were looking at some trades. And you may remember we talked about Matthew Stafford, we talked about J.J. McCarthy. But again, I could see a scenario. I said this just last week where, um, I thought of Aaron Rodgers and several others that are available that I thought Matthew Stafford would be the best for the Raiders. I still feel that way. Still playing at a very, very high level of football. Look at what he did last year. Still a terrific leader. And I can tell you, because of how he has treated other young quarterbacks, would be a terrific mentor for a rookie quarterback pick like a Will Howard and an Aiden O'Connell. So I think there's a lot of advantages there. And um, I certainly think that that is absolutely in play, as I've talked to you about it with you before. Now, I want to talk about Jordan Meredith. Um, I didn't get into a lot on him last week, and I'm because I'm was going over my mock. But let's talk about Jordan Meredith for a minute. Now we know that Andre James was injured last year, but we also know that Andre James was injured last year. We know that Jackson Powers Johnson had the opportunity to play an enormous amount at center and did very well. Jordan Meredith was elite. He was not good. Jordan Meredith was elite. And then we know how good Dylan Parham is. In my 5-round mock draft, though, I had the Raiders being able to grab Gray Zabel at the top of the 2nd round. Now, that's just the reason I think he's a 1st-round talent. I want to make that clear. And a bunch of very, very good drafters, guys who I trust in this league, think he's an I don't know one of them that doesn't have him as a 1st-round grade of the guys that I listen to and trust. But I think there's going to be a ton of bad drafting in this draft. Do you remember me telling you a couple of times? I mean, I would not be shocked if there were potentially 6 quarterbacks go in the 1st round. I don't think that's going to happen. But every guy I have spoken to that I trust has told me they have 2 guys with 1st-round grades. A couple have 3, but most have 2. But I think you're looking at Jackson Dart's going to go in the 1st round. Cam Ward will go in the 1st round. Shadeur Sanders will go in the 1st round. I think Will Howard. I told you the scouting report on him before. A lot of guys have him as maybe a 4, but many of them said if I had Chip Kelly on my staff, because he knows him better than anyone else, if he thinks he's a higher talent, I'd pick him higher. That's why I had the Raiders taking him in the 3rd. But I could see somebody going there. I could see somebody. I think there's potential that Jordan Milroe would go in the first round, just based on some of the teams that like him who are traditionally bad drafting teams. So, I mean, I think there's a scenario where a lot of guys go. And so I think I could push a Gray Zabel down. But the point is, you get a chance to grab a Gray Zabel, anything could happen. And he's a plug and play guy. I told you the other day that I had a scout tell me he hasn't seen a interior offensive lineman like him um, since Zach Martin. He thinks he's that good. Now, when Zach Martin came out in the draft, everybody said he was a pick and play guy. Now, in interest of fairness, only one guy's told me that he has him in a Zach Martin class, but a lot of people have him with Cody Mauch from last year, who you may remember the Raiders loved, or maybe it was a couple years ago, but they loved Cody Mauch. He ended up going to the Buccaneers, obviously where John Spytek was. So, anyways, just wanted to keep that up there. But Jordan Meredith, an exclusive rights guy, this is a solid guy you want back. He's an absolute solid guy that you want back. And I, Raiders are, when then you look at Colton, okay, then you got Thayer and Delmar DJ Glaze battling out. And Delmar DJ Glaze, the mule, played so well last year. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of people wanting to give up hope on him. And Thayer was playing good prior to injury. I don't think that the offensive line is as in bad of shape as people feel. Now, they've got to get depth. I don't think, obviously, Cody Whitehair comes back. There's others I don't think will be back. Andrus Pete, but and so you can't miss an opportunity to keep adding elite guys. Gray Zabel is that. Um, so is Jared Wilson of Georgia, who I had him getting in the 5th round. But I think the Raiders are going to be getting a lot of attention there. And but I wanted to talk about Jordan because I didn't talk about him a lot. I didn't want anybody to think I was overlooking him because I'm not. Jordan Meredith played really well and is a super talent. I want to talk about Shadeur. He's not going to throw in everything at the combine. I don't really think that's a big deal. I know some are trying to make it into a big deal. There's so much tape on him. I I, I I'm going to say this. I had a scout tell me, he goes, I don't like it when they don't do it, but it's not like it's the end of the world. So, he talked about, I like a guy that just shows up and competes. And so do I think it hurt him? Yes, but I don't think it crippled him or wounded him. I just think it hurt him. But interesting there. I think that's pretty fascinating. But we're looking forward to talking to Shadeur down there. Um, I'm just going to tell you, I want to get into this a little bit. I'm hearing a lot of talk from people that I respect about. I read an email to you. I don't know if it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago from a very successful offensive coordinator in the NFL who talked about he didn't have one of these quarterbacks with a first round grade. Now, I disagree with him, but the point is that this is not a strong quarterback class. A lot of people believe next year's has the potential to rival some of the other previous best classes for an elite class. Elite class. I was told that there could be as many as 4, possibly 5 guys next year who would all go first in this class. So next year's a huge, huge class. Just something to keep an eye on there. And so I talked with you about a scenario last week, and I had an NFL executive who saw my podcast send me a text. In fact, let me just read it for you if you don't mind. This is what he said. Hey, Hondo, just happened to catch your podcast. I think it was really good point about what if 3 quarterbacks go and Abdul Carter were to somehow fall to the Raiders. Totally agree with you. Knowing Johnny, talking about John Spytek, knowing Johnny, I would think he would jump at Abdul Carter if that scenario happened. He goes, but I have a different scenario for you. A lot of talk amongst people, this not being a great quarterback class. What if the three quarterbacks are there? Shadeur, Cam, Jackson. Think about that one. I think that may be an interesting topic on your podcast. I don't know that I would let Cam go by 6 if I'm the Raiders, unless they're able to make that trade. But if they're not sure they let Cam go, but what do they do if all three are there? That's an interesting scenario. It's a very interesting scenario. And we talked about if 3 were to go and Abdul were to drop, man, that would be Christmas for the Raiders. Absolutely Christmas for the Raiders. And then I could totally see him moving up and trying to get Genty or trying to get Omarion Hampton, either one. But I just wanted to throw that scenario out there as well because it's not a strong quarterback class. Now, I'd love to hear from you, Raider fan. Are you, because as of right now at this moment, they've not made a trade and we're not saying anything's imminent. But let me ask you this question. Are you so desperate for a first round quarterback that it's like grab whoever? Or are you a, you know what, if it's just not there, move on. If it's just not there, let it go. If it's just not there, if that's not the value, trade back. I'd love to hear from you. To me, though, if the Raiders aren't sold, because here's the problem: you pick a quarterback at 6, and let's pick any of them, Cam, Jackson, Shadeur, anybody. If you take a quarterback at 6, you better be convinced he is your franchise guy because that is humongous value. And you are going to let a lot of people go by. There were a lot of people picked in last year's draft that Talise Fuaga and Brock Bowers make look stupid. And there may be even some that make look stupid because of that Joe Alt go by. Not saying that factually, just saying it could be. Could be. And Joe, but there's a lot of people that already, I think, look stupid for letting Fuaga and Bowers go. Or you just say, listen, I want that first round guy. Because here's the problem. When you get that guy, you commit that kind of money to him. Now, all of a sudden, do you go right back after a year and a half? Or do you, and you know Tom Brady doesn't want to play him right away because he's talked about it. He's talked about young quarterbacks. Where do you go? Where do you go? What do you do if you're not convinced? Here's the whole deal. The Raiders may be completely convinced. No, we think Shadeur Sanders is QB1. In which case, if that's what they believe, they can't let him go by. And I'm going to go a step farther. If you think any quarterback is a franchise guy, you don't care what you have to pay. You go up and get him. But if you have doubts, you don't pick him at 6. 6 is not where you do a woulda, coulda, shoulda. 6 is not where you pick a guy. I'll tell you who ends up at 6 picking again. Want to know who? Tell you right now. People that picked the guy last year that they weren't sure of. And then it's just a continual cycle of a circular firing squad where you keep finding yourself ruined. You keep finding yourself buried. You keep finding yourself in a hole because you're bad drafting. I know Raider fan doesn't want to hear this. There are a lot of decent quarterbacks in this draft. If you're not concerned, if you're not convinced that Dart, Shadeur, or Cam are a franchise, let's say you're not sure that anybody's a franchise guy. I'd rather use the second round pick on a Milroe or a Howard or somebody where you're not overpaying because you can't afford your first round picks to fail. You have to minimize first round failure, especially at 6. But again, you may be convinced that guy is there. And if he is, who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter what anybody says. If you're convinced that's your guy, you go get him. And if he is, you're a hero. This is an interesting scenario. How would you feel if the Raiders aren't convinced and let everybody go by at 6? Interesting stuff there. Very interesting stuff there. That's why I've been talking a lot about a trade. It's a lot of what people are talking about the NFL. I want to go back real quick and I want to address Matt Stafford for one more instance, just because, as you know, we've talked about him quite a bit going back to the Super Bowl. This is an interesting scenario because he's still playing at a much better level than Aaron Rodgers, playing at a much better level than a Kirk Cousins. I don't think that you want either one of those. I think the more money of his contract that the Raiders are be willing to eat, that the less the Rams would want. So I think if the Raiders came in and said, "Listen, we're going to cover a huge chunk," I think they could get him for a 3. I know that's not conventional wisdom. I'm just telling you what people around the NFL think. People around the NFL believe this is a relationship headed for a divorce. And so, of course, they're going to say, we want a 1, 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 we want a 1. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't give a 1 for Matthew Stafford. Wouldn't do it. And I love Matthew Stafford. Of all the veterans, I like him the best. And then go get a young quarterback and you let him help develop Aiden and that young quarterback. And maybe even an undrafted free agent, like the kid out of Laurier, Elgersma. You get him as a UDFA. Now you got 3 young quarterbacks, and Stafford to mentor them all. Great position. Great position. So I think that the more the Raiders are willing to eat, which they have a ton of salary cap, I think the absolute best position they're in to get him. I do believe, and I've talked to other people that have told me the more I think that the Raiders are willing to eat, the lower the draft pick. So there you go. That's everything I got for you. Stafford's going to be interesting to watch, but I am so jacked about this combine. There's going to be a lot of really good information. Now, tomorrow, my podcast is going to come a little bit later in the day because I'll be talking to John Spytek, be talking to Pete Carroll, but we'll have those videos up pretty much right away. We're going to have a ton of stuff for you. So please stick with us. Going to have a bunch of information that I think you're going to love and I think you're going to enjoy. And I appreciate it. Also, if you have any questions that you want, we're not going to be doing a Q&A this week, but we will get to a Q&A, of course, the next week after the combine. So from all of us to all of you, hope that you have a wonderful day. God bless you, everybody. Be safe, and we'll talk to you super soon. Thanks.